My name is Max. I'm Chief Operating Officer here at Devolutions. Yannick.
And I'm Yannick, yes, commonly known as Yannick here. Product Knowledge and Insight Analyst here at Devolutions. Been here for a couple of years. What about you, Candi?
Well, hi, I'm Candi. I am a Principal Advisory Director and a Senior Workshop Director here at Infotech Research Company, based in Las Vegas. However, we are a Canadian firm.
Nice. First time doing a webinar with Candi, and we had a dry run yesterday, and it was awesome. So I expect today's webinar to be really good. Let's go. Without further ado, let's deep dive into the presentation. Privileged remote access, the blind spot in PAM.
Yes, absolutely. Privileged remote access is something that doesn't get nearly talked enough in a PAM program. So today we're tackling it. We're going to talk about how you can give privileged remote access to your PAM vendors, contractors, and do it in a secure and efficient manner. We're really here to talk about the subject around it, not necessarily what we do in our product, even though that's something that we do in our solutions.
Yep.
So we're going to talk about what privileged remote access actually means and why it matters, where the current approach breaks down or has a little bit of a difficulty getting it all together, what good should look like in the context of your privileged remote access, and then how to get started without turning it into a year-long project.
We mentioned remote PAM being one of the blind spots in PAM. What do you see? And my first question for you would be, what's your pragmatic approach? What's your real case, use cases in the real world, working with dozens of clients, customers at Infotech, and from your past jobs as well? How would you define remote PAM, and how would you say it is a blind spot for IT professionals nowadays?
Well, obviously, we're beyond the scope of thinking of a perimeter, right? So, just radically over the last 5 or 6 years, we've changed, the existence of our environment. It really is just expanded greatly. And one of the blind spots that we have is our traditional RBAC and identity management and, just associating passwords, et cetera, has just exploded into other spaces where we have so many more cloud vendors and, different things that we have to manage, while we haven't necessarily greatly changed our approach. So when we're looking at the remote access, everyone's remote, that's cool, but that's just one entry point, right? Getting in is not necessarily enough. And when we talk about advanced concepts like zero trust or managing remote access, we really have to be very aware of not just entry into our environment, but where are we, what are we giving access to? And unfortunately, or fortunately, we have so many more vendors. We hire a lot of people to help us because we have, we just don't have the staffing to accommodate all of these measures, and we trust our vendors probably inappropriately at this point. Our vendors tend to be, one of our bigger softer targets.
Would you say there's been a major increase? I would say, let me rephrase this. Is there a pre-pandemic kind of remote PAM and the post-pandemic remote PAM? Is that, can you say, like, trace a line that says during pandemic we started hiring more remote people, more remote vendors and whatnot, and contractors? How would you describe that?
I would say that because pandemic may have been a shock to a lot of folks, we were giving access. We were really just looking for efficiency and giving access that would match what it looked like when you were in the office. And unfortunately, we kind of missed, because we had to turn things around really quickly.
Yep.
We missed the security concerns about that, and it just became norm, right? We just rolled straight into this is every day, and we not always had the time or even the space to reevaluate what our new environment looked like, because again, we're applying, legacy concepts into, a new space and a new world. So I think most definitely we have a difference between pre and post.
So yeah, if we move on to the next slide, what is privileged remote access, or PRA, or we call that remote PAM again? But what is privileged remote access in a nutshell?
Yeah, privileged remote access is how you're going to give access to different external vendors to your own infrastructure. Historically, this was something that was done even pre-pandemic, like we said, and it's a workflow that's really fractured. Because giving access to, let's say, one machine or one asset inside of your organization, so that people who are taking care of it externally can manage them. When we're talking about privileged remote access, it's really about making that workflow efficient, but also secure. Generally, the efficient part, as we established earlier, is something that we put in place. We wanted to make sure that everyone can connect in an efficient manner. Now, the security aspects of it are also super important and need to be put in place. So, access for vendor contractors, policy controlled, not give broad access network to everyone who connects remotely. VPNs are a downfall in that regard. Making sure that the credentials stay hidden to the people who are using them, and make sure that there's an approval, there's monitoring, and then there is audit that can be done when the privileged remote access is done.
Candi, you mentioned that earlier. You said let me rephrase what you said a little bit, but you meant that we put a lot of effort and money on securing the infrastructure. But once these vendors and contractors are inside the infrastructure, that's where I believe there's a major blind spot again, right?
Oh, absolutely. We have trusted vendors. They're keeping us alive, and we have critical systems that they are managing, and we trust them to do what's appropriate, while not understanding, what their staffing looks like, or what, their access looks like. And again, unfortunately, we're not necessarily well documented in those spaces. Coming from a super regulated environment that you would find in Las Vegas and gaming, we would do so many different things to make sure that the vendor who approached our network was doing exactly the right thing. It was very manual, it was difficult, but we have to understand that it's not 100% about efficiency. The vendor has to get in, they have to update this thing, the IoT has to be established, et cetera. And we forfeit a lot of the security controls and almost 100% of the audit, right? We don't know what they did, what they were trying to do, or how long they were in there. We don't know that they were on or off at any particular time. So the audit for me, again, being from a severely regulated space, it's always, for me, I always land back to audit. Regardless if something untoward happened, at least I can validate the decisions that went into play to allow that access, or make sure that at least something was disconnected at a particular time. Because without those rules, without that audit, it's just hyperbole. You're just talking about it. Right. If you don't audit and validate that the processes that you put in place to secure your environment are there, it's not really it's just a paper tiger to use it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's another thing that I think we notice, is that when you give access to a contractor to your resources, you trust that then you did the work of getting in touch with them and giving them the accesses. What we also notice is that with Shadow IT, with how easy it is to buy software and then give access to your own environment without even passing by the IT department, there's a lot of companies that remote vendors have access to their infrastructure without even IT knowing what's happening. Shadow IT is a real problem in that context. Putting a credit card, buying a license, and letting someone in is something that's super easy nowadays compared to what it was before.
We can move to the next slide here, but my main question for you guys would be, why does this matter now, in terms of why are we talking about this now, and why do we have like 60 people live online, and why we have like 200 registrants? Why is it now a good time to talk about privileged remote access? We talked about pandemic, right? But we feel like, from my perspective, talking with customers and looking at different researchers' papers and whatnot, and talking with people, it seems like every company now, organizations, are all working with, I would say, organic kind of ways to give access to contractors. And so my main question for you is it normal that we get to the point today that we need to rethink about those kind of how we give access to contractors?
Oh yeah, absolutely. What we notice in the research is that a lot. There's more and more breaches that are coming from third-party vendors, as opposed to internal breaches inside of the businesses.
Okay.
So people are getting in, and the horizontal movement is done from the point of entry of the external contractors. Something that happens really often. Yeah.
Do you agree with that, Kenny? Is it part of a
Right.
research? Yeah.
Yes, 100%. We are finding, so if you're a hacker, and I love that image, and I tease people all the time, that the hackers aren't necessarily your drug-addled teenager in somebody's basement anymore, right? These are competent professionals, and they also, especially if you're in healthcare or manufacturing, you have pretty standard vendors, and it's really easy to get into a replication or an infiltration based on your vendor's access than it is to dig your way in and hack in and find passwords, etc. So these are known pathways that exist, and they're pretty consistent throughout lots of different industries. That the bad guys, it's just easier. I'm just gonna go ahead. I know that that's probably there. I know that there's some sort of interface or some sort of data sharing, and that is going to give me access to all the gold that I'm looking for. So yeah, absolutely. We just kind of ignore our vendors as the direct door into our processes.
Then why is it so hard to get? I mean, why is it so hard to put in place, or why? From my perspective, it shouldn't be that hard. Mainly because you mentioned earlier, we sell those solutions, our Devolutions, and we have like client lists, remote access that you can use to give access to external users and vendors, right? But why in industry wide? Why does it seem like it's so complicated right now? And why are we at that point today?
Yeah, the main thing that we notice is that mostly it's the workflow is fragmented. You need 3-4 different tools to be able to reach the point of entry usually. So since these workflows are fragmented and they're not super easy to get to, people use workarounds. They try to go around the policies that you put in place. And as we said earlier, there's a lot of trust that is put into those vendors. But what you want is accountability and be able to track those things. So a good privileged remote access solution, a PRA solution, would make sure that everything can be done from the same platform, unified at the same place, and also that we make it secure in that context. Really, the main problem is you do a manual reset on the password, you give access to the vendor, they reach your infrastructure, you don't necessarily know when they're done, when they're finished, and everything else is still manual process that you need to go through. When it's manual, it's easy to forget.
So Candi, for a good PR solution should be secure, of course, but my understanding is usability is a big part of it, right?
Right, 100%. Because as you guys mentioned, sometimes we're applying friction where it's not appreciated, and traditionally our organizations are really concentrating on efficiency and delivery, and the metrics for security aren't within that conversation, in my opinion, enough to say that, I understand that I've added 15 seconds to this particular transaction, or even, 3 hours. However, that is not towards the greater goal of the overall organization. So you find yourself, sacrificing different things. And I really do believe that we do have to allow for security and our comfort and auditability to be part of the overall metric and a part of the overall success factor. Behavioral, it's all about the operations. If you alter operations to any sort of degree where the profitability or the efficiency feels detrimental once I implement some of these controls. And all our users are saying is, control, right? They don't necessarily understand why we're doing these things because we are not projecting the benefit and what we are trying to contain.
It's one of the harder things in that context is the change management that goes with it. When you're trying to put those workflows in place, when I did some research on change management, the main thing is understanding why the business is doing that change and doing the value proposition of doing that change. And that's how people are going to adhere to the new principles. So if it's super complicated, super lengthy, to do, people are just not going to do it properly.
And there's the financials. There's a financial blind spot again, and maybe people on chat can relate to this. But one of our coworkers here used to work at a bottling company here in Montreal, and he mentioned I talked with him a few weeks ago, but he mentioned that in his previous career, when a vendor, a contractor, or a manufacturer, let's say Siemens, for example, needed to log into their production line, right? It could took up to 2-3 days to get the right access to the vendor so they can log into the system. And while the technician at Siemens, for example, is waiting, they are starting to get billed as soon as he's ready and waiting for that access, right? So you could have received an invoice for 2-3 days, a technician that was just waiting there for a job that could take maybe 2 hours. So I don't know if anybody can relate to this, but I mean, there's a financial blind spot at taking too much time to give those external access.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things that, we talk a lot about the IT team point of views, but the vendors who are connecting to your environment, they also have 20 different workflows to connect to your environment.
Oh, yeah. And
I say but every environment that they need to support.
Maybe, yeah.
So giving them the tools to do it in an efficient manner is usually much better for them too.
Yep.
To then, those financial problems that could occur, to then go around those. Good solution should send that approval and that approval request. Let's say on a mobile device where someone can be instantly notified that they want to have access and then give them at the right moment. What about you, Candi?
Is it?
Well, yeah, and having confidence in the access that you're giving and understanding that you have reportability is really key in that space, right? So, the more we increase speed and efficiency, the more we need to audit and look at things. So that really, really is important, and we want to apply the least amount of friction, but the friction sometimes is not seen by us because, like you said, those workflows can be complicated, especially when we're talking about the workflows that are external of the IT organization, right? What sort of data needs to be touched and what sort of actions need to, happen. There's a reboot or there's some time to install, et cetera. That is also something that we have to start to ingest. And as we apply speed, we can reposition our responsibility into spaces where we are paying attention to the workflows, and then we can therefore adapt much more quickly, right? We can compartmentalize different portions of the workflow and make alterations quicker if we understand the entire workflow.
So if we deep dive a little bit more on the technical side, what does it look like? I mean, what a good PRA system looks like in terms of different actions and different.
Yeah, that's a good question. The first thing is making sure that the credentials aren't stale, right? It's importing them into the PAM solution so that we make sure that the password gets rotated after use and that we have some visibility over what's happening over on that credential. So that's really the first step, is securing the credentials that the external contractors are going to need to use. Second is to make sure that the accesses to those credentials or those assets, because credentials is one part of it, where they're connecting and what they're going to use is also another part of it, is to make sure that you are able to govern those accesses. What that means is making sure that there's a request that happens, and then that you actually approve it before giving it. You don't just give them the accesses blindly. The approval, the request, and then you broker the connection and allow people to come in to the system.
And that's without never revealing the password.
Yeah, right? The password is just, we need it to connect to the assets, but it's just a security risk for them to know it. You don't want them to know it. Oh yeah, and we talk
since like 2012 or 2010, I would say, at Devolutions. We talk about the and you're going to relate to that, Candi, but here what we did with Remote Desktop Manager, our flagship software, was never to reveal the password at the first place. So that's why it took like 2-3 years at least to come in with password rotation in our tools back in 2015-16, because mainly what we were offering with Remote Desktop Manager was not only brokering the connection itself, but credential injection at the same time within the platform, so that the user never had any access to the credentials, right? That was the sole purpose, security purpose, I should say, for Remote Desktop Manager. That was one of the major features that we had, and we still have today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's
I believe-
excellent, because turning off and on, deactivating credentials is not enough if the credentials are known, because that's the tiniest little bit, and
Oh, yeah.
some
Today
quick
we've,
incursion. That the first thing you do is activate some old, well-known,
Yeah.
admin one kind of a password, and boom, you're in.
Yeah, we have evolved tremendously since that time. But even today, I
Yeah.
would say that this is our key component here. Why we're so good at doing contractor external user access is the fact that we manage the remote connection at first.
Yeah. When it's one thing when we're talking about PAM, we're often really centered around the credential itself. We make sure the credential is secure and everything, but you use that credential to connect to something.
Mhm.
That something needs to also be efficient.
Mhm.
And needs to be efficient is the right term in that context. You need to connect without ever seeing it. The password is just to me, it's an issue. I don't want to know the password as an IT person, but I need that password to connect and then to use it.
And once you're connected,
Right.
monitoring and audit. Candi mentioned a lot of audit purposes.
Yeah.
Monitoring. What do you mean exactly by monitoring and audit?
Well, first is you can monitor like in real time what's happening. What I used to do when I was working in IT was giving access to an external contractor and then leave it on let's say a third monitor on my screen and then seeing what's happening there. That's one of the things. But in some situation, you can't always see what's happening. Even contractors, let's say some of them are worldwide contractors. They work in different time zones. You don't always get to do that. So making sure that it is recorded and then you can watch what happened on the machine, on the asset afterward is super, super important. And then the auditing
And you
part,
might not understand what's happening.
Oh,
Right?
yeah,
You might not know
absolutely.
what you're looking at, right? That's why you're hiring.
100%. 100%. And the other thing is, when you can see the session going on, even though you don't understand what they do on the machine, which is something that can happen very, very often, you can at least see if there is some strange behavior happening.
Mm-hmm.
Why did they open a command line?
Mm-hmm.
Why is he going on the hard drive?
Mm-hmm.
Is he trying to find something? Is he trying to put something in place? That's the type of things that you can only see if you have a good monitoring solution or a good recording of what happened.
In terms of good practices, Candi, any thoughts on monitoring and audit? What would be, I would say, maybe top 3, top 5 kind of actions that you would look at when looking at monitoring remote connections, like the ones that we're talking about today?
I think primarily, as you mentioned before, the change management is important, right? Understanding that there is an official process for requests, and within that request, there is a concept of what should be occurring so that you have an idea. And, we were talking about it yesterday. Back in the day, I used to take an image before and an image after and then do a delta and all that. That's really, really difficult, to do when you have so many different folks coming in. So I think primarily understanding and being conscientious and deliberate about the approach and allowing folks to come in, not just, oh, this is a primary vendor, they want in and we give them in and they can do whatever. So having a concise intent for the access and understanding that you are consciously giving allowance for that is really, really important. I think that's really the key factor that we miss a lot, as you guys mentioned earlier, because efficiency just doesn't allow for it. And efficiency is productivity, which is financial. And sometimes it can slow it all down. But now we have more modern tools such as yours, where we can put things into place. And we at Infotech, I work through that workflow with my clients. They have to understand what is going to occur and have some sort of consciousness about the environment in order to monitor it correctly.
So where do you get started? We often talk about, what's the next step? What it's all good, guys. Great to hear the webinar today, but for me as an IT professional, where do I get started?
Yeah, that's a good question, because we know that a PAM implementation project can seem daunting. It's huge. It
can be huge.
It can be, or it feels like it will be. But the main thing is to go with small steps, right? Identify the first high risk vendor that connects to your environment and start with that one. Let's say someone connecting to your domain controller or a highly highly important file server, let's say, to do some changes. If they have access to those, these are the first one you're gonna target. You make sure that the identity or credential that they're using to connecting, you import that first, and then you make sure that workflow continues. It's really small steps. Go with a efficient PAM solution in a context where it doesn't take years to deploy. It takes what we did the test for hours. It's, let's say, 35 minutes if you know where you're going. But the idea is really target the high value one, just one, and then secure that one, and then you'll see how easy it is to adapt to the others.
It's all about baby steps. If you approach it from the program perspective, and I really like to communicate that having privileged remote access controls is not binary, right? It's not on or off. I don't have it all or not have any of it. You have to take it in bite-sized chunks so that you don't have fatigue. You're going to have fatigue from users, you're going to have fatigue from your team, but make it something that is reportable and is of value to the rest of the organization. So understanding critical workflows is imperative, and guarding those critical workflows is really probably the easiest way to approach it. So like you were saying, finding those key vendors that have access to the key assets and making sure that you tighten that up. And then, the results speak for themselves as you approach, other priorities, and you can continue in that space. But it's not, oh, I turned on the privilege access system and now we're good. You have to work your way through it. And that's why it feels like it takes forever, is because you're not taking your wins at every opportunity, because you need to break it up into workflow based and critical risk managed approaches.
So you've identified key vendors, you've vaulted all the credentials and login passwords and whatnot. Then third step, require reason approval, and it does this. We call this approval workflow here, but this give you, Candi, you mentioned about having context of what's happening, right? So does this help you get better context of what's happening when you receive those approval? I mean, you can get your hand around exactly what's happening within your environment, correct?
Right, and absolutely give yourself some space for a couple of false positives, right? Grow into it.
Yeah.
Because maybe you're going to come in too tight. If you launch a workflow control system and it's completely fine, you probably aren't controlling enough, right? You need to be aware of what's happening and give yourself space to learn from the exercise, and then refine your process from there. Again, it's not binary, it's not on off. But just making sure that you are aware of the environment and the behaviors that look good. What does good look like? How are we establishing that?
And I love those time-based sessions.
Oh yeah,
you can actually put a limit on how many hours, days. Maybe this is one of the key features I would look for.
Absolutely. And I had a discussion actually yesterday with a client who was looking to get into contractor access at his business, and what he told me is like, I give access for 2 to 3 days. For that person, so that we make sure that there's a time slot where they can get into the software when they need to do. So when he creates the identity to have access, he creates the identity, gives access to it, leaves it for 2 or 3 days. Most actions by vendor, I would say most, they usually would take an hour, 2 hours, let's say.
Depends on the project. Right? It can be way more than that. From my perspective, it can be more than that, but at least what you do is you create some sort of good hygiene in terms of remote accesses, because you don't have like accounts just in the environment just floating there, right? There's always some time limit you need to put on. So that's the key takeaway here.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you don't see a reason, you don't see let's say a ticket in there, how are you going to make sure that the time they ask for or you're going to give them actually match the actions that they're doing?
Yeah.
With that reason, you're able to do that judgment call saying, oh, I don't think like a day is, I think a day is too much time. Let's go with 2 to 3 hours and then try to regulate that way. Worst case scenario, like if the process to request those accesses is efficient, it's going to time out and then you can just do another request. And then it's super efficient to get into. Yeah.
And we're talking about like approval workflows connecting to the environment, but all of these steps are pretty much being automated with the right solution, right? I mean, it's a lot of self-service. It's a lot of, you might want to approve a connection, but once the configurations of the systems are all in place, it's not a lot of work to maintain. Correct, Kenny? Am I missing something here? But I mean, the automation part is very important, right?
The automation is all of it, because we've talked about the scale has just grown so much. I don't have the staffing. We don't have the time in order to okay, they're coming in. I'm going to monitor them. I'm going to make sure that they left. I've turned on and off their credentials. I've rotated them. All of that is a lot of process, and it just takes a lot of work. But it can be really automated, and I sincerely appreciate those tools, because I've been in the I used to do that all by myself, completely manually, right? Screenshots and running Excel spreadsheets that said, okay, this guy should be turned off at tomorrow at noon, et cetera. And that's why we were giving ourselves those giant windows, because we couldn't keep up with the process in order to turn them off appropriately. And it's just, I don't have time. So the automation is key, and I really do appreciate that. Yeah, it does increase.
That's really a point that, when we look at the reason initially why we get contractors into the business and third-party vendor is to save time, right? Is because you can't hire a full-time person to do that job. So if you get to do manual work all the time to give them access, it's kind of counterproductive.
That's a good point.
Right.
Yeah, because security should, I mean, just get me right. Security is very important. That should be one of the key pillars to work with, right? But at the end of the day, why we're here today discussing remote PAM is to make our life easier, right? 100%. It's part of the job. If we manually manage all these vendors, at one point there's some chaos happening, and we don't get visibility on anything what's happening. And you say there might be an easier solution to work with those external users. And the first step you want to look at is how easy it is for me, which makes my life easier, to onboard these guys in a secure way. And then security becomes some sort of a byproduct of the solution you're going to adopt.
Yeah, absolutely. The security portion should be implied in that context. And really focus on the use case of them connecting to your environment.
And there's a lot of insurance company internal policies, certifications that's going to request businesses to have those in place, right?
Yep.
This is one of the trends and drivers. But my personal driver as a key professional would be making my life way easier to manage those accounts. Honestly, we know, because I've been part of that. I was in IT for let's say 14 years, and then there's too much to do at the same time. There's everything to do at once. So you need those processes to be efficient. If not, you're just no one's going to respect them. No one's going to respect them. So time's running out. I mean, last steps. Recording, we mentioned monitoring, recording, evidence for high-risk work, test, measure, and expand. We mentioned baby steps.
Yep.
When do you feel like, and maybe Candi, you can answer that as well, and when do we scale that solution? Where do we feel like we have a successful plan in place? Where do we feel like we've reached the primary goals we wanted to reach, and then we're ready to scale the solution?
Yeah, in my mind is when you did the workflow for one vendor, you notice how easy it was to put in place and how efficient it is. Once you did that first step, then you can simply replicate that use case to other vendors. So really focus on getting one well-made, good workflow, and then replicate that one to the other ones.
100% agree. There's nothing to do but to start, right? So, but once you get that exemplar, that well guarded asset is now, exceptionally guarded. You've shown increase, and this is the bane of all of our existence, having metrics, right? Having metrics that show before and after of your processes, having metrics showing that, we've increased the success factor of, attachment or detachment, and, position yourselves, understand what story you're trying to tell to the rest of the organization so that fatigue doesn't set in. But take the wins, and the wins are reported with metrics. We have to have before and after shots, and we have to show the value of what we've done and why we've done it. And then, it speaks for itself. People will see. We're all very aware of our security position at home and at work. So it's not too difficult to communicate to people if they see the result of your efforts, other than, oh, they just increased my password length or something. They're just adding some things because that's what security does. But this is of benefit to them and the organization, right? We're looking out for everyone, the health of the organization. So yeah, definitely those smaller, just that first one is really key. Just get started and get it rolling, and it'll become apparent. You'll find people seeking you out in order to wrap them in that same blanket.
Because at the end of the day, if I look at our own PAM solution here, what you do is you create accounts, you create those credentials, you vault them in the vault, what we just said, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, what you do is just you send a link for a web app, a clientless web app that allows the contractor to RDP to your environment, and then you start monitoring, you start securing all the accesses. But it doesn't take a lot of time, right, to onboard those vendors first. It shouldn't take a lot of time.
No. Importing an account and then creating the credentials for them to be able to log into your account, it's a couple of minutes.
Yeah,
like at most.
And then you send out a link for a web application where their account is already created on behalf of the contractor.
Yep.
Logs in. Yep. And he has access from our web application to all the resources he needs to complete the job, right?
And only your resources that he needs to have access to. And then it's a one button, like you click on it, it launches. You never gets to see the password. Doesn't even need to start a VPN.
Yeah.
Which I remember back when I was managing. It's super painful to manage. You manage a contractor identity on 3 different platforms to make sure that they're able to connect. Let's skip that. Just do one in a platform and then connect, and that's good.
We might want to do that, Candi, if you may. I may invite you again in a couple of weeks more, but we can actually do a live demo and creating. That would be interesting to start from scratch.
Oh yeah.
And test our own solution with people from live on the webinar and say, here's how we would do it, right? That would be great, no?
I would love to see that, because I'm not a practitioner anymore, but I have been for many years. Understanding, giving myself the confidence of having a narrowed scope and having guidelines for access allows for that efficiency to take place. The confidence of knowing that workflow was taken in and is part of the process, and I have auditability, that gives me so much comfort.
Oh yeah.
And I'd love to see that. Absolutely. That sounds fun.
Well, of course, we're going to give like the demo gods good gifts before during the live demo, right? But I mean, I see Chris. That would be an awesome test. I think that could be an actually good idea, just to test ourselves and see, because we can't say that it's easy, but we can prove it. During a live demo, we could actually prove that it's quite easy to onboard people
and like you mentioned, because the process is tight and it's streamlined. Even if it's not correct first go, it's so adaptable, right? So just switch it up. Oh, that's not exactly what we want. Fix that little part, and it doesn't greatly change the scope of your action. So it gives you again the space to be incorrect and adapt, as opposed to just here's the door, walk through it.
Absolutely right.
Yeah, and I mean that's a good point you brought up, because we wondered, because it's one thing that we say a lot about our product, that it's easy to deploy, it's fast to put in place.
Yeah.
But how do you actually measure that, and how do you prove it?
How can you prove that? Yeah.
So we did the test, right? We did it with both our self-hosted solution and our cloud-based solution. Mm-hmm. How many times does it take to import your first credential into the solution? The timer that it took me, I know my way around the product, let's say, but starting from scratch, installing it, for the self-hosted one, it was 35 minutes. And then for the cloud-hosted one, it was 20 minutes. Mm-hmm. And then that excludes the whole contractor workflow, but let's add 5 to 10 minutes to that. And then you have a up and running platform.
Fair enough.
That's
so you accept the challenge then, right?
Oh yeah, 100%.
Okay,
100%.
Next one, Candi, I think we're going to prove that to you and the audience, that we can actually install those in a couple of minutes.
Yep.
Okay. I'd love to see it. And I want to see some editing too, right? So, okay, that's not what I want. I want to change that, and I want to kill this process and do it again, right? So I love the adaptability. I love the adaptability.
That could be interesting with different use cases and scenarios. Okay, challenge accepted.
Well, yep. Let's see how we're going to run that. Yeah.
Are you sweating?
No. I'm 100% confident. Before doing that test, I was wondering, I was like, am I able to do it in an hour?
Yeah.
So that's the reason why I went and did that test, right? I wanted to make sure. And if we schedule an hour webinar, 35 minutes should be plenty
All right,
enough
let's do that.
to
That
do
should be a
everything.
good next step. All right. So any
Yay, that's
questions?
exciting. Did we get any use cases in the chat though? I'm curious what like I have use cases in my brain I'd like for you guys to test, but
That's a good
did anyone
Yeah,
have
yeah.
anything you'd like to see in this demo?
Yeah, feel free to reach out. You can reach out. There are a couple of ways you can connect with us. We have the Devolutions Force community here, which is our fan base, is a platform, centralized platform that we work with for all our ambassadors and power users. So we can reach out to you guys, and you can reach out to us as well, and then share those use cases you want to see happen in the solution, and we're going to take those into account when we do the next demo, the live demo with Candi here during the webinar.
Yep. And
Right,
the
right
other
on.
method would be through our forum, very active forum. If you want to get going, ask, and make sure to start a discussion in there and send us the use cases that you'd like to see.
Candi, people can also reach out to you directly, correct?
Yes, absolutely. So I'm on LinkedIn. My name is Candi Green. I am with Infotech, and I'd love to hear. So I do exactly what we're talking about. I help you build those processes, talk about what your workflows look like, and do other deep dives in security. I do workshops as well as, one-on-one advisory services. So I really do appreciate the opportunity. If you guys want to reach out, I am with Infotech. Hopefully we'll be able to throw out my credentials somewhere. But I'm on LinkedIn, so always hit me up, Candi Green. Oh, with an I, Candi with an I.
Candi with an I.
Yes.
There you go.
Yeah,
we have your email address. We can post
Right on.
There you go. You have 2 email addresses. We're on LinkedIn as well. You can reach out to our using
Thank
our
you.
email addresses, and we'll post
Right
that.
on.
Before we go, we're using another tool for vendor support when they log on to get only a list of jumps that they are allowed to use. Is this easy to create in WLS, for example, in a support role? Look forward to the demo for it. Yeah.
Oh yes,
That could be good
that's
use.
actually super easy to put in place.
Yeah.
I won't spoil too much, but with the Devolution server in conjunction with Devolutions Gateway, makes those jump servers super easy to reach. And the main thing for those external vendors is that they don't need a client to connect.
That's
That's the beauty of the way that we decided to go about that. They don't need a client. They do it all in the web interface of the Devolution server or the Devolutions hub.
Or up for us, the other workspace.
Or the hub for those who have the cloud-based one.
Before we let you go, we're gonna reach out to you, Candi, to find time and date.
We'll get you on calendar, and we also have our very large live event, our core customer interaction conference in Las Vegas the week of June 8th. So I hope you guys are able to pop in and say hi.
When is it? When is it? Do you have the time, the exact date?
Yeah, it's June 8th, the week of June 8th.
June 8th
So
in
I
Las
think,
Vegas.
3 days.
Awesome.
And it's wonderful. We're at Bellagio, and it's a fantastic, wonderful collaborative experience. And I do a lot of talks, and I do a lot of one-on-ones. It's wonderful to see people in person. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Yep.
Look forward to it. Yeah.
Great.
Infotech Live.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, thanks for your time. Thanks, Jan, for the time today. Thanks,
Thank
Candi.
you.
It was great talking with you guys, and I hope you guys enjoyed and in the chat as well in the room. So take care, everyone, and we'll see you a couple of weeks from now with the live demo with Jan and Candi. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. Cheers.
Yeah, everyone.